what is FPV?
I just got the call one day say, hey, we're going to film Messi on his debut.
Talking about flying around someone who's probably the most valuable human on the planet.
Yeah, it was intense.
Your first time meeting Bert Kreischer.
Yeah, crazy story. But I was looking through the goggles and I'm like, wait, I think I recognize that guy.
What's your headspace like at that point when you're in this crowded stadium with a bunch of people?
Don't crash.
Hello and welcome to Final, your exclusive behind-the-scenes look at just what goes into running a modern media agency. I'm your host, Connor Aidan, and today we're joined by FPV drone pilot extraordinaire Cameron Goldberg to talk all about the special kind of cinematography. So, let's get into it. Cameron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
I know you filmed some crazy stuff from working with Inter Miami and Messi and Bert Kreischer at Red Rocks. I'd love to hear all about that. But first, can you just kind of briefly explain what is FPV for people that don't quite understand?
Yeah, it's a great question to start off. FPV stands for first person view, which is kind of a complicated way of saying that I see what the drone sees.
Yeah.
So I'm wearing goggles, kind of like VR goggles, that put me in the drone. So there's a camera dedicated to sending video to my drone or to my goggles so I can be in the drone more or less. So it's a really dynamic approach to drones as opposed to kind of your standard GPS based Mavic drones that
I was gonna say, because that's kind of people think of drone cinematography, but this is kind of like a distinction, right?
Yeah, it's a subset of drones, like a special kind of drone. FPV is like a category of drones, and it kind of differentiates itself from the standard drone, what most people think about when they hear drone, which is GPS controlled and computers doing most of the work. And
how did you even hear about FPV in the first place? What drew you to it?
I picked up FPV in 2020 when COVID hit.
Nice.
I ran into it kind of on accident. At the time I was really big into highlining. So I went out highlining, and I had a couple buddies that did video come out to film me on the highline. And one of them had FPV. And I thought it was cool, but didn't really think too much of it until COVID happened, and I couldn't really go highlining with all my friends anymore. And FPV seemed like a really cool, socially distanced hobby to pick up and spend a bunch of time on because I had a bunch of free time. So it just kind of happened naturally during COVID. I picked it up, and I have kind of an addictive personality when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it was very, very much hooked from the beginning, and just put all of COVID into learning how to fly FPV and build drones. And
nice. So it seemed like it started as a hobby, but when did it kind of transition into, oh, what if I did this for money?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely started out as a hobby. There was no part of me at that time that was flying drones with the intention of one day filming with Leo Messi. That wasn't even a possibility in my mind at that time. So, probably a year into my career, or my journey flying FPV as a hobby, I got connected to Zach, who's the CEO of Indoor Drone Tours, via Instagram from a mutual friend. And one thing led to another, and I got a job offer, and that was really the first time I was like, oh, wait, somebody's offering me a job to do this, to work and do this and get paid to do this thing. So it really wasn't until I got connected with Indoor Drone Tours and they offered me that job that I even considered it a possibility.
Yeah, I know that's kind of crazy. So did you have any inkling before connecting with it that you wanted to do it as a job? Did you even know if you could do it as a job?
I know myself well enough to know that I never would have done the full freelance thing as a drone pilot. I never would have done that on my own. It's just a lot more work than I was willing to do, or be the marketing and the sales and the all of those things. I really liked flying drones. So when the position was offered to just fly drones and have everybody else kind of do everything else for me, that was kind of the thing that sealed the deal and made it possible for me to even entertain the idea.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit about Indoor Drone Tours. When you Explain a little bit about like what the company is and like what's its bread and butter. What does it specialize in? It's kind of in the name, but
yeah. So I work full time for Indoor Drone Tours as the director of pilot operations and lead pilot. The company started also during COVID. It started as a non-contact virtual tour service.
Gotcha.
So they would knock on your door. They started in Chicago, so they'd go, essentially knock on your door. Homeowner would open the door and the drone would fly in and film the entire house without anybody entering the house. So it was a very like non-contact, sanitary, clean way of
perfect
getting
for the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. And then very quickly it became larger. We saw more potential in it. We started in the residential market. And then very quickly saw the potential in the commercial real estate space, being able to fly through warehouses or hotels or massive spaces in one take that's seamless. And, there's a lot of value in that for those kind of people.
Yeah. What about that? Because I know a lot of it is one take, and that feels like it's part of the challenging part of it. Was there like any reason behind it being one take or anything like that?
I think that's kind of the magic of it.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like one of those things that, just because you can.
Yeah.
I guess there's an argument to be made that you could walk through a warehouse with a gimbal, but it's just not the same. And being able to tour a space in a seamless one take video is, it really gives you like a good sense of spatial awareness in that space. You can start at the front door, see the highlights of the house or whatever it is, and you're not getting lost in the video. You're not like cutting from the kitchen and then all of a sudden you're in the master bedroom and then cut to this, cut to that.
Yeah.
So it really gives you that like walk through kind of experience or fly through.
So what does it look like when a client comes to you or comes to Indoor Drone Tours, like, and they're like, hey, we want to film, for example, you did like a cruise ship recently. Like, what did that, do they like have direction already? Are you coming up with like the direction for the flight? Like, how does that work out?
It depends. It depends on the client. So the cruise ship specifically, if we're going to talk about that, we worked with another media agency. So cruise ship hired a media agency who then hired us to fly the drone. Yeah. So that media agency kind of had the concept planned out and they had an idea and they understood FPV enough to want a one take, quote unquote, there because there are a lot of seamless transitions, but it's still kind of the same one take type video. So they essentially storyboarded out that entire thing for us, left a lot of the like on-site piloting decisions to me, like, if I want to swing this way around the table versus, this, or hey, like what if we went under the bartender's arm while he pours a shot? Like those are the kind of like my ideas as a pilot. But in terms of like storyboarding and, how they wanted to show the space and what parts of the cruise ship were important and what we could skip was all on the client.
Nice. And I know that's kind of like a big point in drone piloting because, traditionally like drones and people do not mesh well. And there's like all of these rules and regulations about like flying over people or flying around people or even with like within miles of people. But what you seem to do is like you're flying within inches of people at sometimes. So like what does the logistics of that look like? Is there like a bunch of permitting involved or something?
Yeah, there's layers to this for sure. The public perception of drones is hit or miss. People either love drones, they want to ask all the standard questions about them, or they are deathly afraid of them and immediately triggered by them. And there's really no in between. So a lot of the process is, getting the permits, getting the approval, getting the airspace waivers. And there's layers to that too. There's the FAA who controls all the airspace. There's the private property owners who can tell you that you can't take off and land from my property. So there's definitely layers, and it's probably one of the biggest hurdles that we face as a company is just like dealing with that perception of drones.
Yeah. Does that, so like when you have talent on set, like for example, that cruise ship one, do you have someone there that like directs them as you're flying, or like how does that work?
For sure. So I'm pretty vulnerable when I put the goggles on and start flying. Like I am in the corner, sometimes like in a closet or something, you know, with goggles on, essentially in my own world in the drone. So there's no like directing going on from me. But what we will do is we'll either put me on a headset with somebody or have some kind of creative director who can either follow the drone and give directions or, you know, call out directions from wherever.
Yeah, because I've seen a bunch of your behind the scenes videos that you make, and it seems like you have someone on like a walkie next to you just like yelling like, all right, and pour the bottle now or something like that.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the magic of the drone too, is there's no sound. If there was, you just hear the drone. So we can have somebody following the drone, giving cues, especially on the one take with like choreographed actions. We can have that person pretty much directly behind the drone yelling at everybody as the drone is flying, saying, you know, pour the drink now, or the drone's coming around the corner, or whatever it is, which is super helpful.
I'm just curious, like, how do you practice? Do you still practice like to do these like tight maneuvers? Are you just dialed at this point, or?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, it was a lot of simulator practice, like practicing on the computer, which if anybody is interested in flying drones, that's my first recommendation, is to practice in the simulator so you don't spend thousands of dollars breaking drones. But I think at a certain point, it's muscle memory. You know, I understand the like piloting basics and like how to control the drone, but also like my specific drones as they're set up. You know, I've got so many hours on these drones and I don't really change anything about them. So I know, you know, how big or not big they are and what I can get away with.
And that's also kind of like a specific point of FPV, right? Is that a lot of these drones are being like handmade, right? Are your drones like you build your drones?
They're hand assembled, yeah. So I'm buying all the parts and electronics and all that, and I'm putting them together myself.
Yeah, as opposed to like a traditional like drone cinematography where they're just like buying a DJI Mavic and just flying the Mavic.
Right. Yeah, you can't go to Best Buy to get an FPV drone.
Talking a bit more about kind of the work you do, I know you've done recently a lot of stuff with Inter Miami. How did that even come about?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really know the full story. So John is our COO. He is really big in the sports industry. He shoots a lot of like ground camera stuff for the NFL, and name a sport, he shoots it. So I think that connection pretty much came through him. He was friends with Juan, who was our point of contact down at Inter Miami. And I just got the call one day, say, hey, like, we're going to film Messi on his debut.
What was it like when you got there? Did you have like, did they have something specific in mind? Did you just show up for like the opening game? Because I know you did some pre-game stuff too as well, right?
Yeah, so technically we were brought down there to film like a welcome to Miami drone, FPV drone piece for Inter Miami, and Messi. So that was our main deliverable. And then we kind of just like gave them as much content as we could on top of that for, you know, social media posts and that kind of stuff.
All of the content, did you film at once, or have you now subsequently been like, are they like a repeat client of you now?
They were one of our biggest clients by the end of the year last year. So they brought us out the first time for his debut, his first game, Messi's debut. And then they brought us out 2 separate times after that. One was for a big game of some kind. People are gonna make fun of me for not knowing what it is, but some big game, and then the Ballon d'Or presentation as well, which was, you know, Messi's award ceremony, more or less.
Yeah, talking about flying around someone who's probably like the most valuable human on the planet, like how does that work? Are you like nervous at all?
Yeah, it was intense. So like going back to the like regulations stuff, like there was a lot of that. I was the first person to ever fly a drone on the pitch during an MLS game. So there were all the legal hurdles of dealing with that and getting that approval with the MLS and with all of the organizations that surround that. We're also working with Apple TV because they've got broadcasting rights. So they had a bunch of limitations as to, where I can and can't be. And, they've got priority. So they had like a sky cam. There's a lot of things, a lot of things to keep in mind and work around in order to just like get a couple shots with the drone.
What's your headspace like at that point when you're in this like crowded stadium with a bunch of people?
Don't crash. I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, we weren't allowed to go over the crowds. There wasn't the like that aspect of it of like, maybe somebody decides to throw something at me. Like those kinds of thoughts weren't going through my head. It's more just like all eyes were on the field. So if, if my drone goes down, it's not a good look. For other shoots, or even, is that a constant worry of you of like crashing? Is that something that even comes up in the day-to-day, or are you so practiced at this point that it doesn't? So there's a difference between crashing and then like mechanical failures. I'm not really crashing unless I'm, in most cases I'm not crashing unless I'm really trying to push it for a specific shot. Then I'm not really crashing all that often. But mechanical failures and like random things happen all the time. And especially at a live event, there's so many factors at play with RF and just a lot of unknown factors at play. So it's definitely in the back of my mind every time I'm at a live event. And
then I know also you do some freelance stuff for musicians and comedians. Talk about your first time meeting Bert Kreischer. How did that work out?
Yeah, crazy story. Bert, first of all, is the man, like one of the coolest dudes I've ever met. So nice. His entire team is amazing, super supportive. Just all of them are amazing. But we met him super, super randomly. I was filming an indoor drone tour for the Lexington Convention Center.
Gotcha.
So the convention center brought us out to do our standard commercial real estate drone tour fly through. And I was setting up for my last flight of the day, and I start flying, and all of a sudden I see these people walking in the clip. And usually, that's poor planning on my part. I didn't like clear the space and all that. But I was looking through the goggles and I'm like, wait, I think I like recognize that guy. like what's going on here? So I flew up to them, and Bert started like messing around with the drone, like trying to like take it down, like play like that. And I set up for my take and finished the shot. And by the time I'd finished, he had found our hidden control station. And he was talking to us about, this is so cool. Like I didn't know drones could fly indoors. Do you want to fly my show?
Wow.
And we all just kind of laughed it off. Like, ha ha ha, like that would be cool. But they're like, no, seriously, like, do you want to stay and fly and like do a intro or something for the show? So it was very random meeting.
Dang. And then was the show that night, or?
Yeah, he was on his way to his green room. So the show was that night. We extended the trip, and I stayed an extra night and filmed with Bert.
Then in that show though, you are flying over people, right? Because you're flying over the crowd.
Yeah. Yep. I was flying. It was an indoor venue. So there's, when there's a roof over the drone, I don't have to worry about the FAA.
Gotcha.
So it's mostly a venue concern at that point.
Was that like, since it was so spur of the moment, was it choreographed or anything, or?
Not really. I mean, they had an idea, like, Bert's show has some choreography built in. So, he comes out on stage, he rips his shirt off and chugs a beer as his intro. And so like that was a shot, we get his intro shot. The drone follows him up, a couple orbits as he's ripping his shirt off and chugging a beer. And then show starts and the drone lands.
Nice.
And then we've got like a social media clip of his intro.
Yeah.
He also, when he tells the machine joke, he'll like sing the national anthem. So that was another moment that we filmed. Everybody in the crowd puts their flashlights up, and it's a big moment.
Dang. And have you worked with him since then?
Yeah, they brought us out a couple times after that. The first time that we met him was at Lexington. Then they brought us on to their next tour. I think it was in Baltimore. And and then Red Rocks as well.
Dang. And then Red Rocks is outside. So then are you back in the FAA kind of regulations?
Yep. Anything outdoors is FAA regulated.
Gotcha. I would love to talk a little bit about the business of drone flying. Like, what does the field look like for FPV? Is there a lot of competition? Are you the only ones in the game? Like, what does it look like?
We're definitely not the only ones in the game, but we are one of the few companies in the game, or at least like companies in a certain sense of the word. In general, a lot of the FPV pilots are freelance, doing the freelance thing, either that or they've built a small team around themselves. To have a company more or less run by non-drone pilots that employ drone pilots is pretty rare.
Yeah.
Which there's definitely some benefits to both, I think.
Gotcha. What do you think the benefits of working in a company are?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's great because I don't have to do any of the sales. I don't have to do any of the marketing. I'm not responsible for any of that stuff. So for me, it's great. But I think also at the same time, it's especially in the commercial real estate world, those people kind of expect like nice, fancy packages and
Gotcha.
like super quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Everything's last minute. And so like having these people dedicated and full time to handle all of this stuff.
And it gives like a layer of legitimacy too.
For sure.
It's like, we are this entire company. We do this. Like, here's your finished package. We can take care of you like every step of the way. So say, like your typical client comes in, like a real estate client. What are they coming to you with? And then how are you executing on that? Like, what's the typical workflow?
Yeah. So they're coming to us essentially with a property and saying, a property and a goal for that property, whether it's they need something for their internal team to be able to see and understand the property, or they need like a sales asset because they're going to sell the property as a whole, or they're going to like rent out parts of the property or like any of those kind of like goals in mind. And our product is more or less the same for all of those goals in terms of like how we execute. We're flying through the space and showing it off in different ways to kind of meet those goals. But more or less, it's a fly through of the space when it comes down to it. Even the sports stuff and even the live event stuff is just like a unique perspective, if nothing else.
Nice. And what do you think the future of FPV looks like? Because it's pretty new, but like, do you see it developing in any kind of ways?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say with the regulations and stuff in place, because you never know like at what point is the FAA gonna decide to make it too difficult to be worth it. But as it is now, I think, it's really starting to become accepted in the like film and Hollywood industry, which I think is kind of the pinnacle in terms of like the video world and how far it can go in there. And, in the Hollywood, it's bigger drones, bigger cameras. They're putting a gimbal on a drone with a camera on it, and they're like, doing a bunch of crazy stuff that is beyond me at this point.
And what inspires you to keep flying? Because I've seen also recently you've been doing like, I saw a video of you like in a car like piloting, which was like, I don't know if it was like at the Salt Flats, or it seemed something like a big expanse, but
it was actually it was just a friend's property he owns in his lake for us, so we were ripping a car around it. But
dang, that's awesome. Yeah, like what inspires you to keep piloting?
Yeah, so the reason I fly FPV, and this started before FPV, is flow state. Kind of all of my hobbies, or I guess my job at this point too, is all kind of revolves around flow state, and the ability or kind of like the demand that FPV demands my attention. If I'm not paying full attention, if I'm not fully present flying drones, I'm not flying drones. I'm going to crash. I'm going to like run into somebody or something like that. So I for lack of a better word, I'm addicted to that state of being, like focusing so intently on something that my like sense of myself kind of merges with the drone. Like I become the drone in a sense. It's a very like cathartic feeling to be in that flow state. So I'm very much addicted to that.
Yeah. And then I know you said at the beginning you've since stepped into more of like a director role. Like how has that changed? Because I think you went in as just a pilot and now you're kind of leading.
Yeah, I definitely started as just a pilot. I really started as like a Denver pilot for the Chicago-based company Indoor Drone Tours. Denver market didn't really pan out as the way that I originally thought it was going to. So I kind of stepped into the travel pilot role, doing a lot of the like travel across the country. And then, director of pilot operations, which is, it is my title, but there's not many people to direct at this point. So it's mostly just, making sure the pilots, the two of us are,
gotcha,
doing our thing.
So are you the one that has to handle like figuring out the permitting and stuff then?
Like general sense, yes. But all of that comes down to like if a pilot needs clearance, airspace clearance, like that has to be coming from the pilot that's flying.
Gotcha.
So I'll answer, if there's questions about it or like, hey, like, can we do this or can we do that? Like that all more or less comes to me. But if I'm not going to be flying that gig, then the pilot who needs to have all of those clearance.
Nice. And as we wrap up, like what's something you wish more people knew about FPV, or like what's a perception you wish you could change?
It's really not that scary. It's like really not as scary as people think it is. I know that drones have fast moving propellers, and I know when you see the drone videos, the drone's going right by people's face. But the drones are tiny. They're more or less all under 250 grams, which is like, I don't know, maybe you could like figure out what like a half a loaf of bread or something, like some kind of comparison there. Like it's really not that heavy. They have guards around the propellers. I've seen the worst case happen to other people, and the worst case is like really not that bad.
Yeah.
So if I could communicate anything to people, it's that, drones are not dangerous.
And then if someone was inspired and like did want to get more into FPV, how would you recommend they start?
The number one place to start is YouTube. I learned everything that I know about FPV on YouTube University. There's a guy, Joshua Bardwell, who is kind of like the encyclopedia for everything FPV. If you have a specific question about FPV, he's got a video about it. But other than that, it's really just practice. There's nothing that's gonna, get you to the point of, flying FPV proficiently faster than putting in the hours and getting that stick time.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today and talking about FPV. It's so cool. It's so exciting to talk about this like branch of cinematography that I feel like is just growing more and more. It's so cool. But Cam, I have to say, as we say at the end of every episode,
just send it.
Just send it. Thank you so much.